The first dawn of peace had no fireworks, only cold wind sweeping through cracked boulevards and sunlight scattering across blackened glass. September 1945. Humanity opened its eyes after a nightmare 6 years long. What lay ahead was not paradise, but a vast equation. How to piece together a world broken into 1,000 fragments. People began to move, from East Europe to the West, from refugee camps back to cities that had changed names, from train stations to villages with no fences left. They pushed empty strollers, dragged suitcases without clothes, clutched papers that proved only one thing: they still existed. On the road, they didn't ask, "Where are you from?" but "Who do you still have left?" In Germany, cities like Dresden, Hamburg, Cologne, Berlin lay open, wounds that refused to close. Citizens lined up, passing broken bricks hand to hand, wiping off dust, stacking them into new walls. "We weren't just rebuilding houses," one woman wrote. "We were rebuilding a way to believe in tomorrow." Nearby, children laughed while playing among ruins. Tiny architects unaware of the names buried beneath their game. In Japan, the bright cities had become skeletons of steel and concrete. On the scorched earth of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, delicate buds pushed through ash. The Japanese called those flowers the gentle promise of the soil. They gathered shards of broken bowls, fitted them together into new cups, placed them on small household altars, and lit incense, the ritual of continuing to live. In China, burnt fields were plowed again. Irrigation channels met the rivers. Rice seeds were divided by the bowlful. People told each other quietly, "The next season must be better." Across the Soviet Union, trains carried bricks, wheat, orphans, and crumpled letters through empty stations. In America, soldiers embraced their families at train platforms, then woke at night gasping for air because a passing whistle sounded too much like the old alarm. War had ended on the ground, but inside hearts, it ticked on like a slow-burning fuse. Justice took on a new name, the International Tribunal. In Nuremberg, those who had signed death orders were forced to listen to evidence, to read their own signatures aloud. In Tokyo, former uniforms sat in dark suits, avoiding the eyes of witnesses. Verdicts were declared. On paper, justice existed, but in countless unmarked graves, nameless stones still tilted in the rain. No scale could ever balance an entire generation. While the courts pursued justice, diplomats bent over maps. Borders shifted like lines in a palm. Nations split, capitals divided. Walls of suspicion rose long before the first brick. Allies of yesterday looked at each other with the eyes of rivals, and on the desks of presidents and premiers, a single word grew quietly: fear. Yet another experiment began. To speak not through guns, but through votes. In San Francisco, 50 nations signed the United Nations Charter. A few paragraphs on paper, a glass building by the river, a gavel striking wood, small symbols for a vast dream. The rules were simple. Every nation has the right to exist, every child the right to learn, and war shall no longer be a legal tool of ambition. From then on, each new flag raised outside that building became a fragile promise that words might one day outweigh bullets. Across Western Europe, a new reconstruction plan took shape. As disciplined as an assembly line, as tender as an outstretched hand. Factories lit up again, railways reconnected, bread prices stabilized, harvests were scheduled. In small villages, farmers reset their pocket watches to the rhythm of church bells, then went to till the soil. History itself was being set to a new time. In newly built museums, objects from the war were placed behind glass. A dented helmet, a a wrinkled letter, a watch stopped at the second of the blast, a row of tiny shoes. Visitors stood silently. They weren't just looking into the past was looking back at them. In rooms without windows to the street, a different kind of war began. A war of ideas, economies, and beliefs. It was called the Cold War, but the cold wasn't in the ice. It was in the tightening of hearts whenever a siren cast howled, in lullabies that added the line, "If Dad's not here tomorrow," in backyard shelters dug beneath family gardens. The atom became a shadow looming over dinner tables. Still, history wasn't all darkness. New lives began to glow. A carpenter soldier opened a chair repair shop. A shipyard welder became a factory forewoman. A musician who'd lost his instrument received another from a stranger, tuned it, and played the old song again. In a patched-together cinema, the first film flickered onto a silver screen. Audiences held hands as the final scene rose. The applause lasted longer than the ending. Literature and film became needles sewing the fabric of memory. Writers filled pages damp with tears. Filmmakers set their cameras on beaches where white crosses bowed to the wind. Their stories didn't glorify war. They named loss so the living could stand upright before their mirrors. In classrooms, teachers placed world maps before students and asked, how can these borders stay as bridges and not fences? Meanwhile, nations once bound under empires began to claim their voices. New flags fluttered in small squares. Anthems were sung in many tongues. That road to freedom was not straight. It wound through new conflicts, but one question had found its shape: how to let self-determination live without turning into vengeance. Between construction sites and diplomatic tables, peace returned to kitchens first. A mother set a place for the child who would never come home and whispered, "I still keep your seat." A father carried his old uniform outside, brushed off the dust, folded it, and stored it away. His child asked, "Why don't you wear it anymore?" He answered, "Because tomorrow I go to work." That answer, so simple, cut the cord that tied everyday life to war. Peace also took the shape of rituals. In Normandy, every summer people lay flowers on the sand, let the waves carry them away, and lay more. In Hiroshima, lanterns drift across the water, names and prayers written in trembling ink. In Warsaw, choirs sing wordless hymns before bullet-scarred walls. In New Orleans, a guide points to a clock frozen at impact and tells the story of the man who owned it. Such rituals cannot solve borders or ideologies, but they solve memory's question: how to remember and still go on living. Time moved. Children born after the war grew up beneath trees planted the day curfews ended. They learned languages, equations, and how to write letters to pen pals beyond the border. They listened to old stories and asked new questions. Why was there war? The answer was no longer a list of dates, but a lesson. See others as you see yourself. Then one day, near the end of the century, a concrete wall dividing a city began to tremble like an old drum. People came with hammers, spoons, bare hands. Pieces fell, eyes met, arms opened. A guitar played a childhood song. No speeches, no slogans, just embraces. In that moment, history did not erase the past, but allowed the future to begin. But the new world was no paradise. Old hatreds found new disguises. Yet alongside the shadows came persistence. Disarmament treaties, modern war crime tribunals, peacekeeping tents at crossroads, lessons of tolerance added to schoolbooks. History never promises tragedy won't return. It only gives humanity the tools to recognize its shadow. Quietly, people relearned time. The kitchen clock no longer ticked alarms, but ticked water to a boil. Calendars marked birthdays and weddings, not offensives. Dictionaries dropped words like mobilization and added library card, scholarship exam, vaccine. An entire arsenal of language found new purpose. Walking among the white crosses of Colleville, before the monument in Treptow, or touching the endless list of names in a Washington museum, one truth returns. Peace is not a reward. Peace is daily work. It lives in every household, every classroom, every town hall. It's in the habit of correcting ourselves when we're wrong, of apologizing when we misunderstand, of giving up our place in line. Such gestures build another wall, one that stands against the temptation to repeat history. Someone once asked, who won that war? There are many answers, each partly true.